you think through a brand for your company, for your startup, you're actually also defining a framework for the business. And these are not two different things. It came as a bit of a surprise to me because I used to consider myself a person from the domain of marketing. But when I started working with companies, even companies at pre-IPO stage, what we were defining as the core purpose of the company, it's not that the purpose of the company did not exist before we came along, but the fact that we helped create a framework for them actually helped. So at early stage, for example, when you work with a company and you're able to define the brand framework, what it does actually is, I think it gives a lot of clarity to not just a founder, but to the entire organization. As you all know, I'm sure you're at various stages of the journey, but you always are filled with ideas, right? New product ideas, new feature ideas, new ways to carry your business. But you need the discipline of a framework, especially at early stage. And I think knowing the brand framework gives you that discipline as well. So this came as I must say it was a learning to me. That's not how I thought of life when I started work with the companies in the Sequoia portfolio. But over a period of time, I realized that the discipline of building a brand is not very different from the discipline of building a company. And there is a strong linkage between the two. So I'd like to believe that some of the insights that are actually coming from the world of brands are also applicable to the kind of companies that you're building. And that's the more interesting part of it. Because, if you see it as a vertical, it's obviously very critical to most organizations, especially to consumer-facing ones. But if you see it as something that is kind of defining the backbone of your company, then I think it makes it more exciting, more interesting. So as we go through, I'd like you to keep that at the back of your mind, because that's the way I see it, and that's the way I talk to the founders I work with, that what you're defining is not some framework that will let you do a campaign. Frankly, that's the least important part of building a brand, and that's very easy to do. What's really important for you is to be able to define a framework that allows you to create a sustainable long-term enterprise. And that to me is at the heart of everything that I'm telling you today. So the first real tenet for me, the single biggest learning, if you stop me somewhere and say, what's the one thing you've learned in the 30 years that I've worked, is actually the power of storytelling, the power of narrative, the power of being able to tell a great story. And sometimes I feel I had the opportunity to interact with the Sequoia portfolio in the US. I was in offsites where some of the biggest names in the world of venture capital and entrepreneurship came on stage and spoke. Folks like Airbnb and Dropbox, Evernote, and I can go on. I mean, the Sequoia US portfolio is illustrious. And the one thing that stands out is the ability of each of those founders to step up and tell a great story. And I actually think there is something cultural and there is something in the educational system in the West that makes you a great storyteller. So it's a little bit of a natural talent, and it's also something they nurture as part of their education system. We don't do it here, and I think we are disadvantaged doubly. We are naturally not storytellers, and there could be various reasons for it. Some of it is cultural, some of it is parents saying, don't talk too much about yourself, aukat mein raho, become something and then speak. And that's exactly the opposite of what the US thinks. US says, it's okay, talk about it and then it'll happen. This is something fundamental about storytelling that we miss out. And I think the education, I'm very poorly educated. It's not because I didn't study in the US in general. I didn't get into great colleges or great schools, just my background, where I come from. But now I've seen my daughter graduate from a US college, and I see the difference that education brings to her. It's not just what she's reading. It's not the books. The books are available to everyone. It's just the environment and the exposure that the platform gives you. And if I have one regret in my life, not for anything else, not for maybe I could have taken a different path and regretted it, but I think I regret not having that exposure. And I don't think the answer is to send everyone to the US. The answer is to inculcate a system of storytelling for ourselves. Because, education systems will evolve, and they are evolving. And the schools and colleges today are way superior to what I had as options. But I think as founders and as business owners, as parents, I think this is the single biggest call out for everybody. We must inculcate a stronger stronger sense of storytelling. Look at this chart, right? Without commenting on either of the numbers. A few years back, this was the headline that Byju is at $22 billion as a company. And we consumed that narrative at that point of time. Last year, the narrative was, some point last year, that Byju is at zero. I'd like to actually believe that neither of these two numbers are accurate. And the story is somewhere in between. But that's what happens, right? Even numbers actually rarely tell the story. I mean, we all believe in the power of numbers. But numbers are, only valuable provided they set a narrative. And I think that's something that when we look at our respective businesses, I had a recent event where I was speaking to CFOs. And I said the same thing. It was almost sacrilegious. And I was telling them, frankly, your numbers don't matter. Because it's the context behind the numbers that actually tells a story. Like if your company, you could have grown 10% over last year, and you could be a phenomenal success because of environmental factors, because of context, because of your category, because of competition, because of various factors that make 10% a great story. You could have grown 100% and people will say, yeah, that's okay. It's no big deal, right? So the actual number doesn't matter. It's really the context of the numbers. It's how you present your narrative. It's the story you tell. And if that's true of a number, which you will think is sacrosanct, it's a fact, right? But even facts have a context. And that's the power of narrative storytelling. And that's a power that we all need to inculcate into our daily lives, into our companies, into our pitch decks, into the kind of businesses that we are building. Because storytelling is what attracts people. It gives you form and clarity, and it gets people to understand who you really are. And I feel that this unfortunately is a bit neglected for various reasons, irrespective of what kind of a company you are. And it's also because story has a negative connotation, right? It almost feels like if you're storytelling, it's fact versus fiction. It's not. Storytelling is a presentation of your reality in a convincing, interesting manner. If I don't hold your interest, how does it matter what I'm saying? It's irrelevant. I could speak absolute insights for the next 30 minutes and none of you will care. You'll never remember me beyond this weekend. And that's being impactful. Presenting your facts in a manner that's relevant is more important. This is all the more important today. And it's coming from the world of brand, right? When I began my career in marketing, you would do one campaign a year. It would be a 30-second commercial and you're done. I used to think life was damn easy. You do one campaign for a brand and you can put your feet up as a CMO and you're done. It is now a campaign a day, right? You're facing it all in your respective businesses. Attention spans have become smaller. The clutter in the market and the noise has gone up, which means your first task is really to hold someone's attention. Now, what's true from a very global universe perspective is also true one-on-one. I've been for the last 5 years fundraising and for two of our funds. And I know that I walk into a room, it's the impact that I have on the person opposite that will actually decide if the person is interested in wanting to listen to my pitch or it's just a formality and he's like, yeah, okay, good for you, don't want to invest. And I'm sure you faced that situation as you fundraise, as you try to convince a very talented person to join your organization. And I think at the base of everything you do is your ability and your willingness to work on building a great story. And that's, to me, the most important point. If you just take this away from today, I'd be grateful and I believe that there will be some impact on what we are doing here. The second question is long-term versus short-term. And again, is a huge lesson I learned. And I'm actually grateful to a bunch of Sequoia folks, including Mike Moritz, where I learned the single biggest lesson of my life, which is to try and evaluate all significant decisions from the lens of, are you solving for today? Are you solving for the next 5 years? Are you solving for the next 10 years? And I feel that bringing that perspective to work, to decisions, that's how great brands get built. Great brands are not built on the back of performance marketing. I know there's a question, that's bound to come up as soon as I finish speaking. Performance marketing is a great sales tool. It is not a tool to build a great business or a great brand. I'm not saying this today. Some of you might have met me a few years back. I've been saying this. This is the reason we built Spring. We don't have performance marketing within our setup. We will never have it. We don't believe in platforms where the dy by dx of the money that you spend will always fall over a period of time. We don't believe in that. You will need to do it. There are enough people who will hack that for you, and you will have enough people in your team. But that's not going to decide success versus failure. During a period of time when it looked like the capital tap was open permanently, that seemed like a great way to build a business, and that story is over. No one's going to give anybody any more money to spend on Facebook and Google in order to build a long-term sustainable business. You will need to do it. I mean, there's no choice. All of you need to acquire customers, but that's not the way a brand gets built. At the same time, I think performance marketing does have an impact on brand. Unfortunately, many companies treat this as, hey, that's performance marketing and this is brand. And that's two separate things. They don't need to talk to each other. I'm a very authentic brand, but I can say whatever I want on performance, but that's not the way it works too. I mean, I think the best long-term sustainable businesses I've seen manage to find the right linkage between brand and performance. It's very complicated. It's not easy to do. It takes time. But at least for me, the best example of long-term versus short-term is what happened in the last couple of years, where it looked like, hey, I can raise $20 million bucks and that's it. I can build a great business, and that's clearly been disproven. That's very short-term, and I think we have to find ways of building a long-term business. And I think the funding winter, I'm assuming it's over, but what happened in the last 18 months is a great lesson to all of us that we always have to think of the long term. It's not enough to just think of the short term. And I think, in a way, this is a bigger lesson from a brand perspective as well. The greatest brands we know have always tried to build for the longer term. They've taken decisions that's long-term oriented and not worried so much about the short term. We can speak more about this as we go along. The third tenet or insight that I have to offer is what I call the halo effect. You know these two guys, right? Anybody doesn't know one of them? Obviously, Sadhguru, everybody knows. The one on the right is this guy called Nityananda, Swami Nityananda. And if you don't follow, I mean, you would have seen him in all the memes. Now that you've seen his photograph, you'll see the memes and you'll. Now, they're both gurus and they both have followers, and I have no comments or opinions on either of them. I'm sure you have opinions on who you will trust between these two and who you will not trust, right? But that opinion is coming from where? It's coming from the way these two speak, what they're saying. But more than what they're saying, it's the image that they have built for themselves. And I think that's the single most important element of building a brand, which is who is saying it matters way more than what is being said. This sounds super harsh, and it's unfortunately it's a truth of life which is very uncomfortable. Most people will not acknowledge it, but it's the truth. Two people can stand in front of you and make a pitch, identical pitch. You will choose one of them, and you will choose the person who appeals to you the most between the two. When I say appeals to you, appeals to your mind and your mindset as the more credible of the two people, right? And so credibility is really at the source of halo effect. I've been amazed at how it plays out, and you can see it playing out in day-to-day life. If you really trust someone, what they say and their interpretation of the elections becomes gospel to you. If you don't trust someone, that becomes memes and an object of ridicule, right? Someone who's performed well in an elections, maybe a little more than what you expected, suddenly his profile seems to have changed, right? Suddenly in the last 1 month, why are we not laughing at him anymore? What changed? What changed was in 1 month, the credibility changed dramatically because of performance, because of interpretation of that performance. And I had someone recently come home and say, oh my God, he's transformed. I'm not so sure. I don't think he's transformed. I think what's transformed is how we view the world and how we view this individual. And I think, again, this is something that we don't pay enough importance to. And I believe a lot in this. I believe that who's saying it matters. And hence, it's super important to answer the question, why should I believe you? What's your credibility? If you're listening to me today, why should you believe me? Like, what's my credibility? My credibility is, that's why I was very careful to say, I worked for 30 years, right up front, right? I'm not kidding. It's right up front in my deck. Our pitch deck is crafted in the same way. And I sometimes look at a pitch deck and I don't know the founder's experience till slide number 40. I'm like, what the hell? Like, you have to begin by telling me who you are and why I should listen to you. So one of the first things I do in a pitch deck when our founders reach out and say, here's our pitch deck for the next fundraise, I move the who am I right up front. Because you have to tell me who I am. Like when I left Sequoia and started Spring was nothing. It's still very small in scheme of things. And hence I had Sequoia coming out of my mouth in the first 10 seconds. Like you had to know it was Sequoia. When I sent someone a cold mail, the first line unashamedly was, I'm ex-Sequoia Capital. Because I need to tell you who I am. I have to buy your attention. I have to buy your interest. And we all have those factors in our midst as founders, as businesses. You know, what's that one line? What's that two line? This is something that we can learn from a brand, right? When you craft a campaign, you say, what's that one line that can capture people's imagination? How do I be remembered? How do I make people believe me? That's what we are doing as campaigns, but we forget to do it for ourselves and our businesses. What's the one line that can capture someone's imagination, that can make them believe you, that can offer credibility as a reason to believe? And I do feel that this also requires self-awareness. This requires high level of self-awareness for you to be able to dig deep and find these virtues, if I may say so. But unless you do it, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen on its own. There is an odd company where you will find, you know, in spite of all of these factors, it will still do well. And everyone points to that company and says, hey, look at that. I don't need to do anything because look at that company. They did everything on their own. For example, WhatsApp. Nobody knew about the company. They never spoke about themselves. The founder never put himself in front. They had the smallest engineering team in the world and they got sold for 19 billion. Yeah, all the best. I mean, happens once in 100 years, and that's why we talk about it so much. For the rest of us, I think it's harder work. And one part of storytelling, one part of positioning is really who's saying the story and why should I believe you? And that brings me to a question that I do spend time with founders a lot on, which is personal brand, right? So the first question I ask is it important? Isn't the company bigger? Isn't the business? But of course it is. But like I'm saying, finally the company is you walking up to somebody, representing the company, telling them why they should invest or why a COO should join and so on, right? So you are always on the road convincing people to believe in the company. And for that, they have to believe in you. And for that, I think this is super important. So, I mean, this is an extreme example of somebody who's built a fantastic personal brand because by also being very, very clear on who he is and where he stands on issues, right? I mean, there are examples from India. I thought this is the least controversial, so I'll use this. But you know what I'm talking about. There are people who are willing to put themselves on the extreme. I actually think it's a good thing. I actually think when a founder goes up on stage and says work-life balance is bullshit, I don't believe in that. But if you believe in that, great. You will attract people who think like you. You will build a culture that comes out of it. I'm okay with it. I mean, I would advise someone not to join that company, but that's personal advice for me, right? I would never work with someone like I won't even work with them. If somebody walks up and says work-life balance is bullshit, mental wellness is not an issue, that's your belief. But I also feel it's important, but it still works. Like Elon says what he says, and there are people who still look up to him. If you've read the latest biography, he drives people mad. And there are people who like it, people who seem to, at least it works for them for some years. And I think that's fine. But what is good about this is you know where he stands. There's no ambiguity. The biggest challenge is when in building a personal brand is ambiguity. When you wake up in the morning and you are a different person, when the circumstances change, you are a different person. Like I see founders giving advice on social media, and then I see they have sacked 30% of their team the very next week, and I'm like, dude, that's the more look after your people, man. Don't tell me how I should run my business. Just look after your people. And if you had to do it, then give us a context. I mean, that's more valuable, that's more authentic than telling the world, how they should build their business and their life. And I feel that's how personal brands get built, which is who you are, what you stand for, what differentiates you, what makes you tick. If you're able to answer these questions, I think it's an important examination that you must have, preferably with somebody who can help you in this process. But I think it also defines, because today it's inescapable that a founder is the face of a company. Co-founders, they are the face of the company. And I think it's super important that people know who you are, what you stand for. I think gone are the days where the company, I feel that we are also entering an era where the consumer wants to know. It's not just your team and your investors, even consumers want to know who you are. It's very funny, I was in the US and I'd finished a bunch of meetings. And every meeting, it was all back to back. I was in SF. This is the time when the Uber, the noise over Travis broke just before he quit, or he was asked to leave, whatever. And this is around that time. So there was a lot of discontent around Uber, the culture issues around Uber and so on. The blog post that came out about how life is in the company. And I used to finish a meeting and I had to catch a cab to the next one because I was complete back to back. So while I'm saying bye, I've opened my phone and I'm, sneakily trying to input the address so I can book the cab. And invariably the person notices. And that time, when in that particular visit, most people used to say, don't take an Uber, take Lyft. And there was no reason for it. They are identical services. The cost is practically the same. It fluctuates a bit in between, but over a 15-day period, if you check, it's all the same. They're both funded by foreign investors. There's nothing local about either company. You could potentially argue that Uber was in my opinion, a better product. It was a pioneer. It built the platform and the category. But people said, don't take Uber. It became a chant. And I'm saying this not because one person said it. Lots of people said it. It was just that period of time when the company was hated. And I think that's beginning to happen. That companies get hated and people, and I think you will start seeing the voice of the consumer becoming stronger and stronger in India. If your product labeling is bad in FMCG, you're getting called out today. And the consumer is becoming more knowledgeable. And I think they will start to say, don't buy products from this company. They're not being authentic. I think it's going to happen. And I think one part of that is also, who's a founder, what do they believe in, what their ideals are. Maybe the consumer bit in India is still some distance away, but it's coming. And I think the best way to prepare is just to be authentic about the kind of brand you build. And I think that also brings me to conviction. You all know who this great sportsman is and the stance he took during a match, which practically ruined his career. Right? What is more interesting to me is not the individual decision, but what is interesting to me is what happened with Nike when they released that campaign. And there was a huge blowback. And there was people going on saying, I'll never buy Nike again, boycott Nike. And that happens a lot once in a while in India as well, right? But what surprised me was Nike apparently discussed this internally and then decided to still go ahead with the campaign and back the athlete. And I found that quite interesting. And nothing happened. Nothing happened to Nike. I find it very interesting that I find businesses and companies putting out communication and then quickly backtracking when the backlash happens, right? And it's happening a lot in India in the last couple of years. And I just feel that you have to first begin with conviction. You have to be very clear as to why you're doing something. Now, whether it's a campaign, whether it's a policy decision, this whole Zomato veg, non-veg, segregation incident that happened. I just feel have conviction in what you're doing and stick to the core of your conviction, because that needs to come from an authentic place. I use the example of Airbnb a lot. It's a company I really, really admire. And I remember when the Trump government was in power and the that anti-immigration, I don't know the exact, I don't remember the name of the act, when it was passed for the first time, and immigrants were asked to leave within 1 week. Airbnb said they will house them in Airbnbs free of cost for a week. And I remember I was in SF during that period, and I asked one of the board members, I happened to meet him, and I asked him saying, hey, I mean, aren't you guys worried that he'll hurt the company? And the answer was amazing. So of course we are worried because, we are investors. We want this company to succeed. But they say Airbnb is a company where the founders wear their heart on their sleeve. They have built this business with strong conviction. They know who they are. They know where they want to go. And the only way we can help them succeed is by backing their conviction. And I found that a very interesting way of saying, these guys function best when they are emotional and when they follow the path of their conviction. That's very interesting. I've never heard a board member say that ever, because obviously as an investor, you're balancing multiple perspectives. But I found that very interesting from from the perspective that in a world where there's so much ambiguity, someone who's absolutely clear in their decision-making really stands out. At the same time, and I know this sounds super contradictory, but I don't think it is. I just feel conviction is almost goes hand in glove with flexibility, because any brand needs to adapt. Today's world, like I said, we've gone away from the 30-second one campaign for the year to work that's evolving on a daily basis. Your consumer will demand that you change and adapt. And I think we should be also free to be flexible enough to keep an open eye and ear and change ourselves, our brand, our thinking, our communication, our beliefs. I think what changes is what shouldn't change is a value system. I think everything else is really open to osmosis. One, obviously, something that we always say in the world of brands is know your target audience. I have a very interesting example. I didn't bring the video, but you've heard of Nicotex, right? It's India's largest anti-smoking product. And we've been working with them for 3 to 4 years. We're helping them build a long-term platform. And the breakthrough in Nicotex happened from a brand perspective when we realized that most anti-smoking campaigns don't work. And the realization came very strangely. We had just started working with Nicotex, and a bunch of us went for a movie. We were all sitting together, movie had started, got our popcorn, and the anti-smoking message came on. My partner sitting next to me, he smokes. The minute the message came on, he looked down at his phone. And we had just taken the brief from Cipla, and I was very surprised because it was not an accident. And when we stepped out in the break, I asked him, what happened? Like, why did you? Yeah, I don't want to see it. I said, why? He said, I know that I'm screwing my lungs. They're not telling me anything new. And that's when I realized that actually what smokers need is not criticism. It's not awareness. They're very aware. All smokers are aware. And every smoker actually wants to quit. They're not quitting because more often than not, they're not able to quit. And I think what we realized in the journey of Nicotex is that smokers actually need empathy. So shaming them, showing those gory visuals. I've seen people who have a cigarette holder, so they remove that gory pack and put the cigarettes into a cigarette holder because they don't want to carry the pack. So it's not lack of awareness. So, all these awareness campaigns that are being run, they will not work because every smoker at their heart knows this. They shaming them on what works is empathy. And I felt that the breakthrough for this whole world of Nicotex came from being more empathetic and realizing that the smoker wants to quit. So if you're on the same side, you have a better chance. And to me, I just feel there's a very simple brand example, but I just feel knowing your audience, knowing your stakeholders, if you're a B2B business, knowing who you're selling to, knowing why they're coming from, knowing their pain points, is actually key to success from a business point of view as well. One other feature from a brand, I don't know if you've seen this campaign from Patagonia, they actually released an ad saying, don't buy this jacket. And this is part of a campaign that they ran for reusing clothes, for returning old clothes, getting them reworked. repairing your clothes if you don't want to, and they would repair them free of cost. And I found that a very bold campaign, obviously coming from their core of sustainability and environment friendliness, and that's the basis on which they have built their business. The Patagonia garment, actually nothing happens to it for maybe 100 years, I don't know. I have one jacket and I'm completely tired of it, but I can't even tear it if I want to. I mean, it's so sturdy and durable. So they've actually put their money where their mouth is. And I always feel that brands and businesses have the opportunity to also be inspiring. They have a chance to become inspiring. They have a chance to lead a narrative. It's actually a choice. It's a design choice that you will make at various points of your journey. I think when you do it, it just creates a lot of self-selection. I use the Zomato example a lot. A lot of folks who join Zomato just write in saying, I want to work here. I've heard so, because they like the vibe of the company. They like what they hear from the founder. And I think that's amazing. I think a lot of who you are, if you're able to inspire people, I think we realized it when we were nothing in spring. The first 5, and they're still here and they still remind me on a daily basis. The first 5 people who joined Spring worked for 3 months with no pay because we had no money to pay them. And they came in. They came in voluntarily. Some of them knew us from the past. But I find that that's a far easier and more sustainable way to work with people if they feel inspired versus driving them towards a goal. And I think it's a lesson from the world of brands, again valid from a communication perspective. I use this example a lot with founders, which is the power of communication, the power of frequent communication within a company, within a network, within your key stakeholders. Because again, something I'm going to quote Mike Moritz again. One of the things I remember him saying is that he actually, when he listens to a pitch, he feels that the articulation of the pitch is actually a sign of clarity of the business. That your pitch becomes more, and it's nothing to do with command over language. It's not to do, people speak in accents, they have their command over English will be different. He was not referring to any of that. He was referring to your ability to present your business in a manner that has an impact on the other person. And he actually felt that founders who do this well actually are clearer about their business. Now, it's a different matter whether you want to invest in a business because of your own investment objectives. But he saw articulation almost as one of the gatekeepers to going forward in an investment process. And I found that pretty interesting. And if, I do feel that it's another aspect that I think we can spend a lot more time on. Just communication in terms of what we put out about ourselves, the company, how we speak to our team members. This again is very true from a brand perspective, but is again also I think true as founders and business. And lastly, I think again a learning for me over the last 15 years. I'm going to give you 2 examples and then I'm going to stop. One is I was in a conference where lucky enough to have Will Smith taking one of the sessions, and he's a super cool guy as he appears on social media and in films. And he was narrating an incident, and he was saying he was at the dinner table with his son Jayden, and they were chatting, and he said Jayden announced that he and his girlfriend are in an open relationship. And so Will said, what is that? And so Jayden explained. So Will said, why this sounds so complicated? Why did we just cheat? He was obviously being funny. So Jayden said, Dad, where do you live? Right? You can't cheat anymore. I go out with any girl, it's all over social media in like minutes. And Will Smith actually was talking about being authentic. He was using that as a funny example. But he was saying we actually live in a world where authenticity is not a choice. It's just a way the world is moving towards. You have no choice but to be authentic. Because like I said, you can tell a story of yourself and your company on social media. But if the reality is different, you will get caught out very, very fast. You will have team members walking out writing blog posts saying, this company is not what they say it is. Today, the availability of communication has become so democratic that you don't have that leverage. I used to always feel that in the olden days, companies had the leverage to decide. They had information arbitrage, right? That's gone completely. Everybody has access to information. So I just feel being authentic is really core to not just brand building, but also to business building. So I felt that I just wanted to leave you with this. And the second example I have of this, a few years back, there's a founder who called me in complete panic, said, I need your help. I said, yeah. He said, look, we are, some of our staff have been asked to leave. And one of them apparently is writing a blog post. So it's going to be out tonight. And I'm super scared. And, it's going to be very bad for the reputation and so on. And he was very agitated. And I was like, okay, calm down, come. I said, yeah, so how many people have you let go? He hemmed and hawed and said something. I said, no, what percentage of your company has been let go? He said 50%. I said, dude, that's very significant. He said, yeah, restructuring. I said, man, back off. You asked 50% of your team to leave on a day. Take the hit. It's okay. Clearly there were some bad decisions made in the past. Just own up to it. It's fine. He said, what about the blog post? I said, it's fair, right? If I work in your company and I'm asked to leave overnight and I'm one of, 50% of the company, you will take some hits. I said, take it on your chin. It's all right. And he was like, are you sure? I have prepared a blog post. Will you read? I said, no, I don't want to read your blog post. Forget it. Don't react. Be authentic. Be honest. I said, are you helping those people find something else? Are you giving them a little bit of a leeway to find your next job? Are you giving them some time? Yeah. I said, that's all you need to do. Just put your head down and try and help the people who are leaving your company. Call your founder network. See if you can get them jobs. The more number of people you help, the more goodwill you will earn for yourself and the company. Forget the blog posts and the social media. So the blog post came, there was chatter for 3 days and everything ended. And I don't mean that everything ended, so you should not do anything about it. You should do the right things. And again, to me, the worry should be, God, I made a mistake. I'm asking X number of people to leave. That should be your worry. What media says, what's coming in media. I used to have this favorite thing saying, any founder who calls me and says, oh, there is this platform that's going to publish negative news. I say, yeah, just go ahead, no problem. Why do you care? Really, why do you care? Why do you care that somebody is going to publish negative? It doesn't matter. Because the truth matters. So if you're authentic, if your investors know, if your team members know the truth, this is just complete noise and it will die very, very fast. On the other hand, if you're, doing PR, if you're, as they call, it's a dirty word, if you're spinning stories, if you're making up stuff and you get found out, that's going to be damaging in the long run. And I think that also comes from just being authentic to who you are, what you're building, doing the right things. I always feel, if you're doing something good, don't talk about it. The good should speak about it over a period of time. Don't need to say, I did this initiative, I fed 100 people. The minute you start speaking about that, it just becomes another PR gesture. And I see in the world all around us. And then you see people who are genuinely doing good. And when that, over a period of time, it compounds. And then people start saying, I want this investor because they're always by my side. They were there during the bad times. I think that's the way you earn goodwill over a longer period of time. By just staying authentic. And this is true for brands. And I think it's super true for companies and founders as well.